And you're good to go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I can't thank Ellen enough for asking me to do this presentation with y'all. We've had a lot of inquiries about how to make meaningful and positive visits with our families. So we wanted to sort of present it all in one place for you to see if that can't maybe help you as we move forward in your journey and in your caregiving with your loved one. We all love to visit in Southern Louisiana. This is where we are from, right? It's about connecting. But our loved ones with dementia are really no different, yet dementia is one of those diseases that is so disconnecting. It's very hard to communicate. It's very hard to be comfortable and understand our surroundings. So sometimes visits can be a little tough, but we really want to encourage you today to make visits a way to stay connected. One of our biggest comments from families when I say, hey, make sure to ask family and friends to visit, they say, well, they don't remember. They won't remember, so why does it really matter? Well, it makes a difference not only for them and the day that they're having and bringing them joy and some memories, but in the long run, it really helps family to know the person with dementia a little bit different as their journey goes along and to understand the whole caregiving role that goes into that. So it really can matter for not only the person who is experiencing dementia and looking for a bright star in a day, but it certainly does affect us as well as we caregive and as we love on those who are affected by this difficult disease. So we're going to talk today a little bit about the 10 tips for meaningful visits. And in the middle of my circle, you will see that love conquers all. And I have seen this in action personally. I have had many caregivers express this to me. And but when you're in the middle of a very stressful visit, it may be hard to remember that love really can conquer all, even a very difficult disease like dementia. But we're going to talk about these 10 tips today, and I'm going to run through them real quick, and then we're really going to go into each one of them. First, I say choose the best time. I mean, choose the best time of day for your loved one. It's different for everyone. Again, that's what makes dementia a little tough, right? It's a different disease for all of us. Number 2, keep things calm, even keel. We're going to talk a lot about that. And then the third is be respectful. I know that sounds like, well, how would you not be respectful to the one that you love? But we're going to talk about some of those things that can kind of affect respect, and then how that can turn a visit from one little comment into just not a good experience. So we're going to work on really hard on how to keep that in the forefront of our minds while we're visiting. Then I say use cues and clues. Well, we all need to be a little detective. We're going to talk about that. Number 5 is listen well. Okay, listen well. That's a tough one. I'm not a great listener. This is something that I've had to learn. And we're going to talk about how to learn that and how to take that into account when it comes to dementia. And then we're going to talk about using touch and how important that is. And number 7, about planning ahead, about things to do and what that might look like. Number 8, we're going to talk about recognizing the changes and how that affects visits. Then number 9, we're going to talk about bringing children and pets. That can be a challenge, and how to make that a little bit easier on everybody and why it's important. And then number 10 is be prepared for tough questions. Sometimes our loved ones may respond a little differently or ask different questions that can be tough on us and discourage us from even going through that experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about that so we can all be better prepared. Okay? So let's start, dig in. Love conquers all. Well, let's conquer it. Okay? Tip number 1, we need to choose the best time of day for your loved one or night, okay? You need to check with family and caregivers. If you are the caregiver, you need to give that information out when you say, we would love for you to come visit, but mornings may not be best for mom. She's not doing well in the mornings. Or evenings are tough. She's very tired. I like to say, please limit it to 1 or 2 persons at a time so that that whole experience can go a little bit better. So when you talk about best time, what's the best time for just those, 1 or 2, maybe 3 people to come visit? Then we talk about how certain times of day can be more anxious, upsetting, and confusing for those with dementia. A lot of people have heard this term sundowning. It really is an issue in a lot of patients with dementia and Alzheimer's. And that is probably not the greatest time to have people come in, okay? So you kind of have to pick and choose as a caregiver or as a family member, be informed about those times of the day, maybe 3 o'clock, maybe 5 o'clock, maybe 7. For my aunt, she was a late sundowner. They woke late and it was 7 o'clock before she began to look around the room wondering what the hay was going on. And that was the time of day that most of her family would come to visit. And we had to really sit down and talk and say, hey, that's not a great time. We all need to get together and realize our schedules need to adjust for her. And that was tough to kind of face that. But sundowning is real. It may not be every day. There may be days where it's really easy, but other days, more often than not, it may not be. So choose other times of the day for visitors. Late afternoon, early evening, most people are tired, maybe not their best time frame of the day. Dementia persons are no different than that. If morning time is best, even early morning could be good if that can work for your loved one. Again, encourage people to come at the best time for them. My dad was a very, very early morning riser. So if you called him at 6 a.m., he was a happy camper. If you called him at 5 o'clock, he was not so pleasant. Wasn't anything against him. It was just how his day had gone. Most days by 5, he was ready to sit and not talk and not do much of anything. Okay. So try visiting around meal times. It may be good right before or right after. Meal times can be a little confusing for dementia patients depending upon their stage. So if meal times are kind of confusing and it's difficult for them to concentrate, it may not be a good thing. For my uncle, it was a great thing. He had sort of forgotten what a fork and a knife were. And so I would try to stop by at lunch. And that way I knew the two of them were actually eating a meal. And I would stop by right before. And then I sat next to him and used my fork and my knife and kind of guided him. That was my visit with him. And we would talk about the newspaper that day, little things like that. So visiting at meal times can work, but you need to be aware that if they are struggling with eating and not being able to focus, meal times may not be the best time. If they're in a care facility, there are generally lots of other people. And so if you're going to go at mealtime, you might want to ask if you can take them in a little side, on the side, so that you get more one-on-one. We'll talk a little bit more about those distractions that can occur in big crowds as well. I like to encourage families, if you could schedule regular short visits, it's really the best thing, because visiting too long is a little exhausting. And you wonder why things kind of went from good to bad. Well, things went from good to bad because you may get tired, they may get tired, the loved one may get tired, and everybody's a little, snappy. So when before you get to that point, and if you've experienced that, try to cut that visit off a little short. Tell them in advance, 30 minutes is plenty. Please, I would love for you to stay longer, but for him, 30, 45 minutes is plenty time. And then we're going to take a break. And then you can come again another time or later that day. Anything like that. When we were visiting my dad, I used to bring my 2 little girls for a quick visit when I picked them up from school, and they were hungry and they would all have snacks together. My daddy didn't eat the snacks very much, but he thought he was, and he thoroughly enjoyed it. That's a 15, 20-minute little break that can really work. Again, that was the best time for my dad before he got real tired at around 5:30. So really concentrate and put some effort into figuring out that best time of day for that loved one. The next tip, it's really important to keep things calm. Avoiding large groups and events can be very helpful when you're visiting. Large groups and events can be good with the right care for your loved one. But if what you want to do is visit and connect, that can be a little bit overwhelming and confusing for them. They're not sure where to look. They're not sure who you are. Those sort of things can be a little tough when you're trying to visit and connect. I like to say reduce the distractions. So if you are at an event, we used to have family gatherings, and my dad would be in the formal living room where he was most comfortable, and we would all go in and visit for a little bit at a time. That reduced his distractions and kept the noise down. Or if there was a football game going on and he was confused by it, it was okay. We would let him go sit a little bit in the other room and keep the TV off. Turn off the TV and the radio if what we're trying to do is connect with them, okay? Remove that background noise. Create a peaceful surrounding. Some people like all that, we're just not used to in our homes or with our loved ones to maybe not having a TV on or not having a radio on. But some of that needs to change if your loved one is getting anxious and confused. We love to keep our doors and our windows open, maybe not on a day like today, but on pretty days. We had one on Monday. It was a gorgeous day. And who didn't want to keep a door and a window open? But if what you're trying to do is connect and they keep hearing the traffic outside or the noise or the sirens, shut the door, close the window. Let's try to stay where we are with our loved one, okay? We want to work on being more focused and more one-on-one. Turning off the TV can be a little tough, especially if they're used to the TV being on. My mother-in-law, I start by just muting the TV. Hey, I want to talk with you. I can't hear you. So do you mind if I mute the TV? Generally, it's met with no confusion. And then as the conversation goes on, I say, oh, let's turn this off so we can really visit. And it takes a few times, but eventually the TV will go off and that distraction for her then goes away. And then, we can really get a good visit and try to talk about whatever photos I may be showing her or whatever family I'm trying to connect with her about. And that's going to kind of come down. We're going to talk a little bit about doing those activities too. And when you reduce the distractions, you can concentrate in on those activities that can really make a connection and be so important for your loved one. Okay, tip number 3 is to be respectful. Who would not be respectful, right? But we need to recognize that our loved one has a life that's rich with history and experience, skills, and dreams. They've shared all that with us over the years. Some of their visitors may be the very ones that they've experienced life with, right? So we want to make sure that we treat them with respect. that we don't correct them, that we don't argue. Much of what they say may be very wrong. It's okay. Talk to your visitors in advance and say, look, Dad gets a little confused. So I'm going to ask you that when he says somebody's, he saw somebody the other day and they're dead, it's okay. Don't correct him. Don't argue with him. It's all right for now. We just want him to know that you're with him and that, he's not alone. And it's okay for them to think somebody's still alive or think that they were doing something yesterday that they didn't do. It's all right. Try not to argue. Now, the next one is try not to talk about them or over them in front of them. So sometimes a loved one will ask a question, well, how's he eating? Well, he's sitting right there. So you have to say, Dad, I think you're eating well. Include him back in the conversation. Or Mom, you had a great day yesterday. It was fun doing puzzles. Tell Vicki about your puzzles. She may not have anything to say, but at least you're redirecting that conversation back and not talking over them or about them. That is very, very difficult when you have loved ones and visitors who are brothers and sisters who care a whole lot about how are they doing. Because what do I talk about when they can't really talk back to me, right? We're going to talk about activities so that you can kind of include that be respectful while you're doing those, conversations and activities. But just remember talking about them or over them in front of them. How does that make you feel? None of that is really respectful. It's not our intention, but it really can diminish a person who's sitting there, okay? So we want to encourage them to choose to be a part of. Mom, would you like coffee? Would you like tea? Would you like to walk to the porch? And then if they don't want to do that, it's okay. That's fine. Be ready with choices, but limit them. You don't want to give them, too many choices about the many things to do. Let's just keep it one or two things and let them choose from one or the other. Would you like to sit and talk or go inside? Would you like to step outside for a little while? Let's go here. Things that being respectful does not mean, ignoring. How do I say that? Being respectful means not ignoring them and not talking over them and giving them a voice in whatever may be going on. Something as simple as, would you like the chair or the couch, Mom? Let them choose. Things that make them feel like the adult and the person that has lived this rich history. You need to respect that. I love this one about being respectful, about taking a walk or changing rooms. Invite them to do that in a respectful way, especially if things are noisy or things have kind of gotten out of hand. It may be an easy way to divert the conversation. We are working on visits being part of that independence and that self-esteem for our loved one. It's a time for affirmation. It's a time to tell them how good their shirts look and how I like your new hairdo. Doesn't matter if it's new, like the new hairdo. Love your purse. Anything and everything that can be positive. My aunt loved her engagement ring. So I could flatter her with that every time we talked. Oh, I just love your ring, Nanny. You must still love it. And she would say, oh, yes, and she could go back and tell you the story until late into her disease, which was always a good way to hear her voice. You may have heard the story 20 times before, but it's their voice and it's a great time to give them those affirmations. Okay, we're going to go to tip number 4, which is use clues and cues. So what do I mean by that? I want you to be a detective when you sit down or when you enter a room with someone with dementia, okay? I want you to look around and to kind of feel how they're doing. Are they attentive? Are they recognizing you? Make eye contact, okay? Use verbal cues and gestures to orient them. Make sure to put your hand out to shake their hand. Make sure to connect with them. Introduce yourself. Hi, Nanny, I'm Ann, I'm your niece. And sometimes she would say, how long have you been my niece? I'd say, well, for a while. And I have a daughter and her name is blah, blah, blah. Her name is Mary Margaret. And she would say, oh, that's a very pretty name. Again, we could talk about names and people for a good 5 minutes, okay? But you have to include a connection who you're talking about. Nanny, that's your neighbor. You know, Mr. Smith and Mr. Joe was your neighbor, but he's living in Thibodeau now. Nonverbal signals such as pointing and directing can really be helpful when you're trying to guide them, okay? When you want to say stand up, you want to put your hands up. Let's stand up. Hold my arm, but don't just say hold my arm. Hold my arm. Take my hand and give them your hand. Things like that. Coffee. Would you like a drink? Oh, I have some pie. Little things like that where you're doing verbal and nonverbal cues. So much of our language is expressed in how we behave more than what actually is said. And for a dementia patient, they take in much more of the looks, your smile, your gestures, much more than what is actually being said, okay? And for you to understand what's going on with them, we're asking you to slow down and take your time and then give them time to respond. The average dementia patient takes 16 seconds to answer a question. That's on average, okay? As they progress into the disease, it can be a lot further. 16 seconds is a long time, like a long time. And we're not used to being quiet. I mean, I can sit here and talk to y'all for an hour and be a happy camper, right? So we have to, in talking to our loved ones while we're visiting, is sit back, relax, watch what's going on around them, and try to support them in doing those things that might be a little bit more difficult for them. Not just in behaviors, but in their thought processes, okay? It's noisy, and as an example, it's noisy outside, you want to close the window. Don't just get up and close the window. You might be met with, why'd you close my window? Okay, so you stand up and say, oh, that's very loud. I'm trying to hear you. Do you mind if I shut this window for just a little while? Generally, okay, fine. Or let's close the door so I can talk. It's very loud out there. Little things like that can really make a difference, but we have to slow down, change our tone of voice, and work really hard at being present with them. And that's not very easy for any of us. The next tip is to listen well. Well, that's a challenge for all of us in every daily life, is listening well. It's a skill well learned. I think we can all say that it's something we can all work on. Some of us are natural listeners and some of us are natural talkers. Depending upon the person you're visiting, they may be a very good listener, right? But it's your turn to listen for them. It's important that what they say is heard. It's important that that person feels heard in the conversation, in the surroundings, in the experience, okay? To have a relaxing visit, we have to be with that person. They may not know our name. They may not know how they love us, but that love will conquer all. And if you sit and listen to those feelings and ask for those feelings, you might be surprised. We're going to talk about tough questions in the end. But when you ask those tough questions, when you say, how are you feeling today? And you get back, I don't know, that's okay. Or I'm not feeling well. It's okay. I'm here to help you feel better. No, you can't make me feel better. Try not to take that personally. Okay. It's not about you today. It's not about you for that half hour. It's about validating them and hearing them. I'm sorry you feel that way. I hope we can help. How can I help today? You can't help at all. Smiles and nods help, even though they don't know it. Holding hands can help, even though that person may not recognize that. But when you hold that hand, you make that connection. Doesn't have to have a lot of verbal with it, okay? But listening really takes patience, and connection is listening, okay? Validating, repeating to them what they just said to you in a positive way so that they know they are heard, okay? Sometimes the best thing to do is to simply listen and show that you care, and they will feel that without even much coming out of your mouth, okay? That's a challenge for someone like me who loves to talk, doesn't like quiet time, wants to visit. I came to see you. Why aren't you talking to me? Well, slow down. Let that whole little visit kind of fall out. Smile a lot, nod a lot, and put your hands out for them to be a part of you. That is listening well for someone with dementia. Okay, number 6, I'm back to a really important touch. A really important tip is to use touch. Gentle touches can be so comforting. A little tap on a shoulder, okay? Putting a hand out and getting a hand back is so reassuring, okay? If your friends, a friendly hug, a kiss on the cheek, if that's who they are to you. My nanny was a kisser and a hugger. And I realized one day, we were all walking in, kissing and hugging on her. She kissed and hugged. And then one day I kind of realized she's a little, like she didn't realize she was kind of pulling back. So we began to say, can I give you a kiss? And of course, when you asked, she said, of course, of course. She was more than happy to be kissed and hugged on. She just didn't know who you were. So it took her a little bit. Again, we had to slow down before we immediately went in for a hug and a kiss. I would always hold her hand and say, can I give you a kiss now? And she'd say, oh yeah, that would be good. Much needed connection. And again, not all communication is verbal. That touch, sometimes you may be one of the few people who they actually touch that day. If they live alone or they're alone in a nursing home and or taking care of themselves or alone in a care facility, they may isolate themselves, and you may be that one person that day that actually touched their fingers or held their hand or put your hand on their arm or their shoulder, okay? Contact literally combats isolation, and dementia is a disease of isolation. When I can't communicate and I don't know who you are, I pull back and then other people pull back. And we need to outwardly use our hands, use our love, and use our affection to let those people know that they are still connected simply by holding a hand, simply by walking arm in arm can be the most, touching thing of the day for them, and they can grab hold of that and have reassurance in that. Isn't that one of the points of what we're trying to do is visit with them to give them reassurance and to give them positive affirmation. It creates that loving connection that we all talk about in the month of February for Valentine's, but it's tough for those with dementia. And that's what our visits are really working toward, making those real connections, okay? So one of the things that I think is very cool is to plan ahead. So you know that person he loved to read the newspaper. My aunt loved to read the newspaper, but within her dementia, she wouldn't read the newspaper. So I would take the newspaper of the day and cut out pictures and go with just the pictures that morning. Okay. And I would say, look, Nanny, this was the Sears building downtown. And she said, well, of course, it's still there. Okay. Well, I didn't argue with her. Anything like that in the newspaper, she loved to see the bridal pictures. I would cut just a few. She didn't know who they were, but we would go through and look at some of the bride's pictures, things like that out of a newspaper that didn't cost me a thing. That was an easy way to connect with her. And we could then, sometimes I would read a little article about the bride to her, little things like that. But planning to do meaningful activity together. Bring photos, current photos, past photos, whatever photos you may have. To visit my mother-in-law, I now have a grandbaby, and so I made sure to bring a little stack of the new grandbaby pictures. Well, it took her 20 minutes to go through 10 pictures, but she thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I labeled every picture with her name, what she was doing, and the date right in front of my mother-in-law, and she was pleased as punch. She could then, that gave her back a reference on the picture. Had I been smart, I would have brought a little book, but I wasn't that smart. But it's great to bring a little scrapbook, make some pictures, put them in with a little label next to them. It doesn't have to be a fancy scrapbook, doesn't have to be, unless that's their treat and you have all that and they've been scrapbookers. I have a few friends who probably would do great at scrapbooking, even in their disconnect, they would remember how to use scrapbook paper and scissors. It's all a really good thing to be able to do. Old letters that you might find, or if you have children who are away at college, getting them to write quick, short letters to their grandparents or their aunts or uncles, postcards from where they are. My daughters used to send postcards from Birmingham for my aunt and uncle to be able to, and I didn't send them to their house, they would get lost. So I would collect them and bring them all, 3 or 4 at a time. And we talk about different things that they were doing in Birmingham while they were going to college. But all of that's, I had to plan that ahead and stick that in my purse and make sure that I had that to do with them. I also always kept music on standby because it's such an easy thing for them to be able to enjoy and a great thing for you to do with them. My uncle was he had a record player. And so I would go over and sit him near the record player and put his records on for him and let him choose which album he wanted to listen to. And, take them out and show them. You might be able to bring albums to them, or you don't even have to play the album. You could play it on your phone and bring the album. Anything old like that harkens back to their real world. Can be a great way to connect and spend that time during your visit doing meaningful things. The games and the puzzles really do work at different stages of dementia. If they can play simple games, or if they can even watch while games are being played. My aunt was never a card player, but turns out she was a pretty good Crazy 8 player as the years went by. And I never even knew she liked cards, but I had to try something new during our quick visit, and we played. She knew how to play Crazy 8s, and she knew how to play fish. Eventually, she wasn't able to do Crazy 8s, but we moved out. We moved to playing fish. Simple card games, simple puzzles. We have a great game here called Conversation Starters, and you pull a little tongue with little conversation starters on them. And that is just a simple way. Put some questions together. My mother-in-law is composing. She's still able to write and do all of that. And so we send my brother-in-law lives with her, so we send them questions. It actually came from an idea online, but we send her questions and she answers our questions and he scans them back, and we're compiling a book this year for her to be able to tell us these many things. And your loved one may be past all of this, but they can still tell old stories. So it's a great way, if they told you one in your last visit, make some quick notes and say, tell me about, my aunt had, her brothers all had fun names like Uncle Boo and Uncle Da and Uncle Bebe. And, we all have good names like that. Go back and write those little names down and say, tell me about Uncle Bebe. And they may not remember and say, well, I don't remember either. Do you know anybody else? Anything like that is a conversation starter, can really be connecting. But the point is, even for a 15 quick visit a couple of times a week, if you could plan something ahead, put a simple puzzle, bring a simple, album, and search that on your phone where you can play that music for them and let them look at the album is great. Do a scrapbook, bring old letters, anything that is connecting and there is still at their level of activity. If you need some activities for your loved ones at their level, that is what we're here for. Give us a call. We'll make some suggestions and see how we might be able to help you find those 2 or 3 little activities at that stage of their journey that work for y'all right now for visitors to come. We're going to talk about children and pets as well, and I really want you to think about that. Okay, keep in mind, we have to recognize these changes in dementia. Again, my aunt played crazy eights, but then we had to move to fish. Eventually, she pretty much watched me while I play solitaire and talked to her about the solitaire. She wasn't really able to communicate anymore, but she was still interested in the cards, which I always thought was a little fascinating. But keep in mind that dementia is dynamic. What is one day may be very different the next day in this disease, and that makes it kind of hard, okay? But you need to recognize that so you're not surprised when things don't go well one time, and I did the same thing 3 days ago and it went great, okay? And dementia changes over time. What they can do now, they may not be able to do 3, 4, 6 months from now, okay? Maybe a day where they do recognize you, and on some days they don't. I say, please, please, please remember that's the disease working. We don't want to take that personally. We want to move on, okay? Now, bring your patience. Bring your calm, and give a connection to your loved one. Give that connection. Okay, tip number 9. A lot of people say the kids are too much. Try to bring children. It's important to maintain those relationships. Think of it through the eyes of a child, your loved one. Children just light. Older adults just light up. I light up to children. They do too, okay? But you do, if the child is able to really understand, and as they get older, you really do need to discuss with them what they can do, what they can't. Ask them to speak clearly and to slow down a little bit, that it's kind of quiet time. While we go see Grandpa, we go see Papa, it's going to be quiet for a little bit. We're not going to stay long. Be realistic with your children about what you expect of them while they're there. Then, if you can, give them something made by the child that you're bringing or the children that you're bringing. Have treats to share with them. Doesn't have to be candy, but stuff that they can share together makes that time together really special. Take pictures so that the next time you go, you can say, look, Laura came to see you and we had so much fun. Little things like that really, really bring that connection and let them know they are connected to someone, okay? They may not remember tomorrow, but while they're there with you today, they will. And pets, pets, pets. It's amazing, okay? Pets offer instant love and affection. Animals bring calm and joy, okay? It creates this instant connection. It's good for those struggling with communication, all right? If they're living in a community, you need to check the rules, consider visiting on a patio, but don't let things discourage you from bringing, they may not even know the pet, okay? But bring a pet, get your children, grandchildren, if it's a animal that's pretty easy to fool with, you'd be shocked at how connecting it can be for both of them. I'm going to say children and pets at the same time can be wonderful, but take that in small doses. Children and pets together, it's a lot. Again, our loved one is slow to process, so we need to take that into consideration. But literally, I can't encourage you more about bringing children with kids just instantly smile, and pets bring big smiles. So if you want to say love conquers all, who doesn't love a cute little dog, right? Who doesn't love an adorable 5-year-old? You just can't go wrong, all right? And it creates memories for you that can really be so meaningful. Okay. The last tip I'm going to talk about can be a little tough, and it's about being prepared for questions. We want our loved ones to share their feelings. We need to be opening to listening, acknowledging their feelings, and reassure them. But there may be tough questions like, are we going home now? Even when you're sitting in your own living room, okay? They might talk about somebody who came to visit them who's long passed. It may be about how much they don't like your sister. Suddenly my mother became, not my mom, my aunt became very open about who she didn't like. And it was hard on me. I had never known she maybe didn't like all it, and I was wondering how much she didn't like me. It goes back, we are humans, and this can be tough on our heart, okay? But remember, the disease is very strong, but love is stronger. Love really does conquer all. And if you can be prepared for these tough questions and not need to correct, my aunt really never remembered that her husband was dead for several years. And she would say, ask when he was coming to pick her up, and he'd been dead a year. And it was very hard for us, her grandchildren, her children, to not say, no, he's gone. We went to the funeral. And then it reopened, that wound. And then she was embarrassed. She didn't remember her own, husband was gone. So we have to be very careful in how we answer these tough questions. Also, they may not know that they live in the city they're in. They may think they're back when they were a child. Well, it's okay. It's tough for you. They raised you. I'm 60 years old. You've been in Baton Rouge for 60 years. Why do you think you live in New Orleans? You don't. You left there at the age of 18. We don't need to go through all that. If they think they're living in New Orleans in their family home, ask a question about, well, how many rooms did that have? I didn't know about that house. You'd be shocked at how much they remember and what they can tell you back. But you have to be prepared for that tough question about, she thinks she's living in New Orleans and she's been in Baton Rouge 60 plus years. It's hard on us in our reality to put ourselves into their reality. But it's best, and you can create great memories by holding on, recognizing what's going on with them. And that can be very hard. It's not the simplest of things. But if we're prepared for the tough questions and we keep in mind all of our other tips, it can really be a wonderful, wonderful memory and experience. Just little short visits. We're going to go through some do's and don'ts before we close down. Some do's, make sure to keep your tone and your body language positive. Smiling, truly is love conquering all. Just a smile. And if you have caregivers who are taking care of your loved ones, that is my first statement to anyone who we would hire for my loved ones is please, you have to smile a lot. Even when you don't feel like smiling, you have to smile a lot. Okay. Smiling and positive body language. Don't speak too loudly. All right. Lower that tone so that it's not alarming. And many of us speak, I mean, I am a very loud person. I was raised in a loud home. My dad did not do well in his dementia with loud noises. Probably didn't do well as a husband either with all of us children running around, but we never knew that. But certainly by the time he was into his middle to late dementia, our noise was very disturbing, upsetting, made me very anxious, didn't know where to look. So we had to all learn not to yell, even in laughter and fun, and to keep our language at a better tone when we talk to him. Okay. Making eye contact and staying at that level is so very important. They need to be able to see you. Okay. They need to know you're there. Make that eye contact, then make that hand contact. Okay. Introduce yourself. It's very hard to walk into your mother's room and say, "Hi, Mom, it's Ann." Okay. I'm not your mother. Well, today you don't have to be. It's okay. All right. But I'm still Ann. Introduce yourself. Okay. Speak as slowly and in short sentences. Give direct information to them. Let's stand up. Let's sit down. Verbal and short sentences work really well. Hold my hand. Let's go this way, that way. Little things like that. Give them time to speak and don't rush. All right. Be okay with sitting in silence. It's a wonderful thing. Holding somebody's hand and sitting in silence is a great connection. It's all good. Go with the flow of the conversation, even if it doesn't make sense. Again, that's back to that respect and about giving them their voice and listening to them. Any memories of the past that you can share with them is truly wonderful. That dementia will remember that past so much more than the present. Okay. Yes, yes, yes on giving hugs, gentle touches, and staying connected. All right. Yes, yes, yes. Now some don'ts. Okay. Don't say, "Do you remember?" It really can create arguments and embarrassment for your loved one. Yes, if something goes wrong, we all want to correct it. It's natural. You know, we've lived our lives as sons and daughters, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters. And when my brother says something wrong, I am the first to say, hey, that's not what happened. Hey, you got that wrong. Now's not the time. You got to let it go. It's time to be present. Okay. Don't point out mistakes. It doesn't help the conversation. It's all okay. The important part is that they're actually, connecting and communicating. Okay. Don't assume that they don't remember anything. A lot of those affected have moments of great clarity. You'd be shocked at what they could tell you. Please try not to talk down to them. They aren't children. There are times where that is very hard, but we have to really work on that. And don't talk about them with other people as if they're not there. That can be very, very demeaning and difficult to, wonder why you're not going to have a good experience. Well, they just got mad because you talking about them and they're sitting right there, right? One last tip before we go, and we're getting close. I love a guest book. I love a quick note. It doesn't have to be a fancy guest book. Any spiral notebook will do. You can create your own quick info page date, time, who, how'd it go, how was the time spent. You need to know if other people might be bringing a puzzle or might be bringing pictures. It's a great way to come and go. A lot of people keep a medical notebook about their loved one, but I'm gonna call this a guest notebook, okay, where your loved one may not recall who came to visit if they're living in a community. So it's a great way for you to know, all right? It also provides your loved one a nice little reminder. And it kind of encourages them. You can even begin to call and follow up and see what went well and what did not go so well, so that you can continue to encourage them to come back and have those short little visits. It's a great way to keep track. Over time, it's exhausting, okay, to keep all of this information as a caregiver together. A quick little guest book can really be helpful for you to kind of know what's going on. Doesn't have to be fancy, just something that records the visit, okay? I highly suggest that. So we really, really love, we want you to visit often, or just once in a while, whenever you can encourage people to visit. Making the most of your time together can create these special memories and really can create more meaningful visits. We want more visits, not less. We want to do these things that can encourage family to stay connected to the people who may be affected, and hopefully can let them know on the day that is how loved they are. I had one caregiver who said, don't forget, Ann, every day, hold their hand, kiss them on the cheek, and let them know you're there. I thought that was a great piece of advice, and that is a really good way to have love to conquer all, even this difficult disease. So we're down to questions. If anybody has any questions, now is the time. Miss Ellen, are you there?
I'm here, Ann. My goodness, this was incredible. This was so powerful, I think, and impactful to families, and such positive reminders. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
We've gotten a few comments, really nice comments, but if anybody has any questions for Ann, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We haven't gotten any questions yet, Ann. I think you're just that good.
Okay. Oh, right. Sure.
Here we go. Here we got one. What do you suggest when your loved one is unable to communicate verbally?
I suggest music would be my first suggestion. My second suggestion would be connection and some quiet time. I think that is the best. And if they have skills less, it doesn't take communication to match cards together or to match pictures together. I believe pictures and memories, they don't have to talk. You can just lay down the pictures. And I used to bring 2 pictures at a time. Like I would double print pictures of my kids for my aunt. And so I would put them all out and say, hey, look, let's match them. She couldn't talk anymore, but she could still reach and point for the picture. I'd say, okay, point those 2 together. And then I would talk about that child, that grandchild. That's Annabella. She lives in Texas. And and she would just look at me. She couldn't communicate anymore, but that was a great treat for me to be able to do that for her. So I would say music, pictures, put together a family memory book, with old pictures that you can sit and go through with them. I also read a lot to my Uncle Bob. He loved the newspaper, and he would sit and listen. He couldn't talk anymore, but I read the newspaper to him. Anybody else have any other suggestions? That's a great question, because nonverbal is very tough.
That is a great question. We have another really good question too, Ann. What do you suggest when your loved one will not wear hearing aids and can't hear very well?
Verbal cues are really important. So many dementia patients get where they don't remember they need hearing aids. So you're going to have to quietly, that's a good term, kind of put them in your hand talk to them and then slip them in. I used to have to slip my aunt's glasses on her head. She didn't believe she needed glasses. So we would talk about the pictures, and then I would say, here, try my glasses. But I had her glasses on. And she'd say, no, I don't need that. Well, just try them for me. And she'd put them on. And, oh, look at that. That's a cute baby. Well, I'll be darned. Hearing aids are the same. You have to maybe say, look, I'm trying these, and act like you're putting them in your ear and then put them. If they can't tolerate that anymore, you're going to have to do more quiet things. I would say pictures, if they can watch movies or shows my daddy loved, and it's an awful show, but Gunsmoke. But I could put it on for two Gunsmoke and he would watch Gunsmoke. He wasn't listening anymore, but he was seeing that was one of his favorite shows. So, and it didn't seem to bother him that he couldn't hear it anymore. It was really non-pleasant for us, but it certainly did give him a whole lot of joy to watch Gunsmoke. And so Andy Griffin was also one that, so think about old shows like that they might be able to watch with you, or old movies that even though they can't hear, they may still be able to watch some of that. Probably not going to be able to watch stuff current very much because they can't really follow it, but old stuff that they saw years ago, they might be able to follow. So I would say pictures and movies, and a lot of hand directions. Slow down, learn how to kind of communicate like that way, this way, give me your hands, things like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Ann. The next two questions are kind of similar, so I'm going to wrap them into one. So the first question is, what do you say, what to do or say when your spouse wants to call his deceased mother? And then the next one says, my mother thinks that her parents are still alive and always ask about them. I always just tell her that they are fine, but I don't introduce myself or call her mom because I feel that would be confusing that she is a child of my age. Any suggestions for those two thoughts? I think those are both really good questions and both very common situations that a lot of families encounter.
Absolutely. I love how the second says, there's no reason to tell her I'm her daughter. You can be her friend. You don't need to be your daughter. That's great. And if they ask for their mom, just say, well, she's not here right now. All those, the right now, you're not, you're trying your best not to lie. And then you're trying your best not to say, oh no, they're dead. So you just kind of little things like she's fine. She's what maybe she was doing. She liked to go to the grocery. My aunt went to the grocery every day. So when he would ask after her, I'd say, well, she's at the grocery. Now, 5 minutes later, she didn't remember all that, right? But that's okay. We got through the moment. And you're right that if they don't, if they don't really realize that you would be their daughter at your age, it's okay for them not to understand that. The only one that's hurting, is sort of you, and that's part of the difficulty. And if that's about not taking it personally, and understanding that, yep, they may not remember all of that, but they still know they're connected to you. They still know you're special to them. And again, my aunt did not know that I was her niece, but it never failed that she would connect. She didn't know how, I didn't know how, but we still stayed very, very close, even when she couldn't talk and couldn't hear very well. But that's when, your gentleness and your hands and your connection really come through. But you do have to, the second statement about, I don't want to tell my mom that I'm, my 60-year-old self. Well, no, if she thinks she's still 30, it's okay not to have a 60-year-old daughter for today. You never know. You might walk in the next day and she really does know you now. I love that movie, The Notebook. I mean, those flashes, those lightning flashes of reality do really exist. And they do come and go. It's just not as often as we as loved ones would like, but you got to enjoy even that in between time.
Thanks, Ann. One more question that came in. It says, thanks for all the great info. How to handle repeating of the same question over and over again, forgetting that they just asked that question.
Yeah, again, you can answer it. You can answer it. And then I would distract at some point. Try to find another something to do. Because if they couldn't remember they had asked you, they would not be asking you again. So until you move on to a different, maybe even, hey, let's take a walk outside. Hey, to try to distract them. Or I love your earrings today. Wow, who gave those to you? You may have been the one giving them to them. Anything that can then take the conversation beyond that same question may help.
Awesome. Thanks, Ann. We have a lot of other nice comments I'm going to save for you, and I'll put in the evaluation survey for you. Oh, we got one more question. You have time for one more, Ann?
Oh, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What can you do when a parent may say ugly things? And then we have another one, if you have time, Ann. Any advice for a mom waking up during the night and not sleeping?
Yeah, mom waking up during the night is tough. If it's consistent, and you may have to talk to doctors about that. If you have to work the next day, I mean, it all kind of depends upon, if you have a caregiver sitting with them and they wake up in the night, it's okay for them to be up a little while. Try to redirect them, get them comfortable and relaxed, play whatever their quiet favorite music might be. You might be surprised, they might calm down and go back. Generally, waking up is about anxiety in the middle of the night. So try to figure that out and get them back toward the bed as early as possible. And if that continues and they're up through the night and they're switching days and nights, then that you're going to have to readjust that whole thing. What was the first one?
The first one was, what can you do if maybe your loved one that you're taking care of may say ugly things?
Yeah. So be prepared, because they're going to say ugly things, because that part of the brain that's a filter is gone now. Okay. It's just not what it once was. A lot of people curse and say things that you would like for them not to say. Basically, you need to kind of look at the other person or understand to yourself that it's not personal. Again, my aunt, I walked in one day and she loved me and told me before she was sick how gorgeous I was every day. I walked in one day and she says, "Oh my word, you have really gotten fat. What happened?" I was like, "Oh, wow." For her, I was still the 25-year-old who had married her nephew. She didn't see me as the 45-year-old, 50-year-old woman with 4 kids, 3 kids. So she knew who I was, though, but it was not a pretty comment. And I just said, "Yeah, I'm loving life, man." Try not to understand that that is the disease working, and that if other people are affected, do the best you can to let them recognize that, my loved one is affected. Alzheimer's is a tough disease. I'm so sorry. I know that's not how she feels in her heart. That's just what's coming out through the disease. And then redirect, and redirect again, because probably it will be repeated multiple times. We have an expert in this coming at our annual education conference on April the 19th. And her name is Teepa Snow. She will be here in Baton Rouge for us. You're welcome to go to our website and go to the education conference. But truly, she has amazing stuff, older videos online. We would love for you to attend our conference, but we also recommend that anyone who wants to really look into those difficult communication strategies, that Teepa is a great expert in positive care and how to turn those difficult things from difficult to positivity.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ann. And we had one more comment just in the chat that I wanted to read out, because I feel like probably a lot of people can relate to it. It says, my husband asks the same 2 questions every time we are together. It's frustrating because I can no longer redirect him.
Yeah. try to answer them as best you can. He's probably anxious about something, so we might want to explore a little bit more about what he's anxious about, maybe about not knowing you. You never know what's really going on, but trying to get to the root of that problem can solve that repetition. Could be that at that time of day, that's when their anxieties go up, so that if we do something to preempt that, that could be helpful. So I'll throw this to Ellen to tell you that she is a great social worker and can come up with solutions to the most difficult of problems. And yes, there are times when distraction is not going to work, and that you might have to be more proactive than using distraction on the other side, where we might have to be doing some things in advance before that anxiety that's creating those questions kind of comes up.
Thanks, Ann. And we can wrap it up here. Thank you so much for such a fantastic presentation. I'm so appreciative. And thank you to everyone that joined us. I'll include the link to the conference in the follow-up email in case anybody would like to register as well. So thank y'all, and we hope to see so many of y'all next month.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks,
Bye.
Ann. Bye.